Picture this. You're in a cockpit. An alarm starts screaming. The weather, which was fine a minute ago, suddenly turns ugly. What do you do? Well, for a pilot, the answer isn't just about gut instinct. It's about a very deliberate, very structured way of thinking. Today, we're going to pop the hood on the mental toolkit that pilots use to conquer risk. And, maybe see how we can use it back on the ground.
So let's start with a number that should really grab your attention. 80%. According to the FAA, that's roughly how many aviation accidents are tied back to human factors. You see, it's not usually the machine that fails. It's the decision-making in the cockpit. And that is the problem we're going to unpack today.
So how in the world do you fix an 80% human problem? Well, you do it with a better human process. The aviation world came up with a framework they call Aeronautical Decision Making, or ADM. Now think of this less like a rulebook and more like a mental operating system upgrade. It's a system designed to spot our flawed instincts and replace them with a clear, repeatable process for making the safest possible choice every single time.
All right, here's our flight plan for this explainer. First up, we're going to dig into that 80% problem and see exactly where the errors happen. Then we'll get into the psychology behind it, these 5 hazardous attitudes that, trust me, affect all of us. After that, we'll look at the simple checklists pilots use to check on themselves and the mission. And finally, we'll see how it all comes together in this powerful, continuous loop of decision-making. Ready? Let's go! Okay, so this 80% problem, where does it actually live during a flight? You might think the danger is kind of spread out evenly, but the data tells a completely different story. It turns out, the highest risk is packed into just a few critical moments. And knowing that, well, that's the key to preventing it. Okay, check out this breakdown. Nearly half of all accidents happen during takeoff and landing. Just think about that for a second. These are, by far, the shortest parts of any flight, yet they hold almost all the risk. This shows us exactly when a pilot's decision-making has to be at its sharpest, during those intense, high-stakes moments. All right, so now we know where the risk is concentrated. Let's talk about why. If this is a human problem, then we've got to look at human psychology, right? The FAA did exactly that, and they identified 5 predictable mental traps that they call hazardous attitudes. And these are not just for pilots. These are universal flaws in our thinking that can cloud anybody's judgment.
So as I go through these 5 attitudes, I want you to be really honest with yourself. Which ones sound familiar? Because this isn't really about flying. It's about how our brains are wired. These are the mental shortcuts we all take, and they can lead to some really bad decisions, whether you're in a cockpit or a conference room.
And here's the genius of the whole system. It's not about deep, complicated therapy. It's about simple, practical antidotes. The moment you catch yourself thinking that anti-authority thought, you counter it with follow the rules. Feeling impulsive? The antidote is not so fast. Think first. The whole point isn't to pretend you'll never have these thoughts. It's to build an instant mental reflex to catch them and neutralize them on the spot. So, now you're aware of the mental traps. What's next? A personal diagnostic. Before a pilot even thinks about looking at weather charts or the plane's maintenance logs, they have to check the single most important system on board, themselves. And they do it by asking one simple question: am I truly fit to fly today? And this is how they do it. The IMSA SAFE checklist. It stands for illness, medication, stress, alcohol, fatigue, and emotion. Every single one of these is a direct threat to good judgment. Even something like a minor cold, a stressful day at work, or just one bad night of sleep, it can shrink your mental capacity and set you up for a massive error. A safe flight has to start with an honest look in the mirror. Okay, so the pilot's done the self-check and they're good to go. Now they turn their attention outward, to the flight itself, and they use another really powerful framework to systematically scan the entire mission for risks, making sure that absolutely nothing critical gets missed. It's called the PAVE checklist, and it covers the 4 big pillars of risk on any flight. First, P for pilot. Am I proficient enough for this specific flight, not just any flight? A for aircraft. Is the plane's equipment up for the job? V for environment. What's the weather doing? What about the terrain? And finally, E for external pressures, which, as you're about to see, might just be the most dangerous one of all. Yeah, that last one, external pressures, is so often the sneakiest and most dangerous risk. It's so insidious because it's not a storm cloud you can see or an engine you can hear. It's a feeling. It's that little voice in the back of your head whispering, "Come on, just go," pushing you to ignore all the other clear, rational signs telling you to stop. And a lot of the time, it sounds totally reasonable, just like this. This is a perfect example of what pilots call get-there-itis, that overwhelming urge to get to your destination no matter what. See, it's not a mechanical failure or a legal violation, but that internal pressure can be more deadly than pretty much any technical problem you can face.
Okay, so we've got the self-assessment with IMSA and the mission assessment with PAVE. But flying isn't static, right? Things are constantly changing. So how do pilots manage risk in real time? Well, they use a simple but incredibly powerful three-step loop that just runs on repeat from takeoff all the way to touchdown.
This is the 3P model. It's super simple. First, you perceive the hazard. This is where you're constantly running that PAVE checklist in your head. What just changed? Second, you process the risk. What does this new information actually mean for the safety of the flight? And third, you perform whatever action is necessary to deal with it. You mitigate the risk. And the second you do that, the loop starts right over. Perceive, process, perform. It never, ever stops.
Now, that process step in the middle is really the secret sauce. It's where you go from just seeing a problem to truly understanding it. And ADM takes this out of the realm of gut feelings and makes it a rational analysis by asking two simple questions. What is the likelihood this thing will happen? And how bad will it be if it does?
And this is the tool they use to answer those questions, a risk matrix. It's actually incredibly simple. So let's say the chance of hitting some bad weather is occasional, but for a pilot who isn't rated to fly through clouds, the severity of that is catastrophic. You just find where those two lines intersect on the chart. High risk. That's it. No debate, no gut feelings. It turns a vague worry into a clear, actionable piece of data. When you put all these tools together, they all point to one core principle: knowing the difference between what's legal and what's smart. You see, the regulations are just the absolute bare minimum for safety. A true professional pilot operates based on their personal minimums, and that takes into account their current skill, their recent experience, and that IMS safe check they did that morning. They always build in a margin of safety that goes way beyond what the rulebook requires.
And honestly, this is the real power of aeronautical decision making. This whole disciplined process, checking your personal readiness, scanning the environment for risks, and running that constant perceive, process, perform loop, it's not just for pilots. It's a blueprint for making better decisions when you're driving in a snowstorm, launching a new project at work, or facing any complex choice where the stakes are high. So, I'll leave you with a little challenge. The next time you feel that pressure, that push to rush, to ignore a little warning sign, or to just get it done, just stop for a second. Ask yourself, which of those 5 hazardous attitudes is at the controls right now? And more importantly, what's my antidote? Because making the smart choice, well, that starts with knowing the right questions to ask yourself.